What's up, y'all? I got my phone stuck in a vise right now and it's kind of tilted, all right, so we're gonna run with it. I'm gonna take a page out of the Explosions and Fire Guys YouTube videos because the shop talk, I think, is gonna be the best way for me to deliver my words and not sound egregious reading off of a script. The big motivator for this video is my writing class. We have a creative project assignment and this is the media that I've chosen. So with that, thank you, Instructor. It's really helped me find a good workflow for what I want to do with this channel. And moving on from that, you may be wondering, where's the gearbox video? There came a lot of design challenges that I didn't really think through until I bounced them off with a friend of mine. And it became a big bite to chew. So we're gonna take a step back and really think through that project, and we're gonna set ourselves up for success. So the scope of this video is to 3D print a cool little desk item for me. I would like to make this little crystal ball holder, and instead of a crystal ball, we're going to have a ball within a ball within a ball within a ball. That cool thing from the early days of rep wraps printing. That's been a print that's infatuated me, and is that the right word? It's intriguing to me, and I never printed it until now, so let's hope it goes right. And if that falls through, we have a low poly fireball, which will look equally as dope on the little thing. Like, who doesn't want a little fireball? Yeah, anyways, we'll probably try to print that one hollow to get the cool effect from using these clear resins, and I'll get to that in a sec. But before we do that, we're gonna calibrate these things. And you may ask, why am I doing a calibration video when there are tons out there? And you're completely right. So the scope of this is me calibrating a printer for my own sake of documentation and referencing in the future. And if any of these little discoveries or any notes that I find on this process help you out, there you go. Just don't take me as fact, because I'm just a dude in a shop. Anyways, we're gonna start off with the cones of calibration, and we're gonna make that little city thing because they both look pretty cool. I'm gonna do some mainly just bottom layer and normal layer time exposures on this. I'm not gonna mess with the feed rates and whatnot. I feel that I don't need to tune for that level of detail when I'm gonna be printing mainly large objects and a minimal amount of, like, I guess, crazy geometry. So we're gonna be tuning for just some standard garbage that I would print on my FDM printer. Now, I'm not saying that out of just pure laziness. This is a very new realm. Turning a liquid into solid and then having a further curing process that involves, like, there are so many factors that can go into the dimensional tolerancing or dimensional accuracy of these parts, to where I think I'm just gonna stick with some default settings and we're just gonna play with the bottom layer and the top layer exposure. And so to move on with that, we have our Soraya Tech Blue Tough Resin and we have our Rich Optos resin. So this is the clear V2 and this is just some water soluble orange resin. And you may ask, if I'm making a cool little fireball thing, why didn't I get resins with similar properties where I can mix them like those cool resin caster guys? And the only answer I have for you is shut up. Anyways, these resins got some pretty decent stats, I'd say. I'll put them up here. I've yet to figure out in practice what these numbers really mean, but that's a fun project to tackle another time. And I guess, to give a little bit of a personal note as to why I guess I'm putting so much importance on the calibration of this resin printer, with FDM printing, I started out with just your usual bed slinger, the Thing-O-Matic. Years later, like I said, I got an Ender, and now I have this VZ-Bot. And all of my printing profiles, I've never written anything down testing-wise. I never just, put down settings, made some notes on it, be like, oh, this worked, this didn't. And I've gotten to the point where on some of my printing profiles, if I change one setting, it's likely the setting that wasn't the culprit. And there's just so much stuff that I've messed with that I need to basically start from scratch. So we are being proper and we are gonna set ourselves up for success with this resin printer. So I've been recording in between printing and whatnot, and whatever. I had a green screen up before, but that didn't really look too well with using the garage door in between all this, so we'll figure that out another time, let's say. But I want to give a little like safety note here. I used to work at this aircraft place, and we dealt with some hydraulic fluid. We had that red oil, and we had a Skydrol. And for those of you who know Skydrol, I'll give a little scary word out here for some chemistry stuff. A big thing on the little warning label is, warning, this is a type 4,5 phosphate ester. If you're interested, you can look more into it on your own time. I am not too knowledgeable in that sense on the corrosiveness of chemicals like that. But I will say, from my experience around it, it's not the end of the world when it touches you, okay? But you know, you get some skin contact and it kind of burns, you get an itchy sensation, whatever, it's bad. You wash it off, you get rid of it, and you wash it, degrease, all that jazz, cool. But that was in the workplace environment. And so now that I'm back here, it's like, oh, I'm dealing with resin. I have to take the same level of precaution. But I mean, I will say, if this little story has any gravity, the clear resin, I spilled a little bit on my thumb trying to do the one dirty hand and one clean hand method of extracting the parts from the build plate. And I slipped and I touched it on my thumb a little bit, and it kind of burned, I won't lie. And this is just me putting it out there. You see some of these horror stories of these guys dumping a bottle of resin on them in a more industrial printing environment, and you get some chemical burns. And you know, I just thought I'd put that out there, right? I haven't touched the water soluble resin, and I well sure won't after touching the clear one. But just think about some of the extra precautions that you should take, because you could just be all just, you know, shop mentality of the, oh, cleanliness isn't whatever because it's in my own garage. Some of the stuff is pretty darn nasty, and I mean, if you touch it and it burns, I think that means it's bad. So with that, I thought I'd just ramble about it, just for some more awareness. You always see some of the just don't touch it, but I mean, when you really feel it, it kind of hits a bit closer to the heart. So there's a tip. I totally forgot to make a little transition thing, so here we go. I hope I explained things properly, and without further ado, we're gonna get to the bit where I talk about what I'm actually supposed to be doing in this video. So here we have it. Look at all these beautiful parts. I'm gonna go over the details of it, and then I'm going to explain the features here. So for test 1, we started off with a layer exposure time of 2.5 seconds and a bottom layer exposure time of 20 seconds. Moving on to test 2, we kept the exposure the same at 2.5 seconds and changed the bottom layer to 15 seconds. And then on trial 3, we had the same exposure time of 2.5 seconds with a bottom layer time of 18 seconds. And this goes for all of the cones and all of the cities for the clear resin here. Now, moving on to just test 1, we see that cone 1 had failed, and the bottom inside and the bottom top are pretty decent for just a baseline here. We see that it's inevitable at the top that there's going to be some curling of that topmost layer due to lack of support, and that's pretty okay. Noticing that the inside bottommost layer is very flat and is very clean. Moving on to test 2, we have more or less the same deal. We have cone 1 failed. The bottommost inner layer looks pretty good, and the topmost layer still has some sagging. There is some roundness to the cones, and I'm not sure if that was an under or overexposure issue or it was a post-processing issue. So I will say it was both, and I need to learn how to use a brush better. And moving on to the cone test 3, I had it flip backwards because of those cone failures. And so looking at the printer, the failure side was facing you instead of the success side. So with that, cones 1 and 2 failed. We still had a very good inside bottom layer success, and the inside top layer looks a bit more nasty with the extra exposure. So with that, I thought test 3 was the best, but moving on to the cities here, we see that with test 1 at the bottom, I have a large amount of overexposure, seeing that there's these resin radii that shouldn't be there when there should be a sharp, more or less a sharp angle, not a curve. A lot of the text isn't readable, and there seems to be some issue at the top with all of these studs not showing up. Moving on to test 2 here, we see some text, and there's some whitening out around all of these tiny features. And I want to say this is due to the solvent that I used. This was the denatured alcohol that I got from Home Depot. So maybe for clear resins, denatured alcohol scuffs up the surface chemically and makes it opaque. So we'll keep that in mind for the future. And moving on to the third city here, we don't see any text for the city's name, and we still see a lot of these radii at the bottom. So I believe this is also way too overexposed. But looking at the cities, we see that test 2 is the best. And when I get around to filling the vat up with clear resin for the remainder of this video, I will print another calibration piece to confirm that this was overexposed. But seeing here that at test 2 it was the best, we have a baseline at 15 seconds is a good number to work around, and we might try to shoot for around 12. So that does it for the clear parts. I didn't ultrasonic tank them to post-process. I just brushed them with the alcohol and let it dry, and then water cured it in the sun. But I don't believe that the denatured alcohol is going to be the best solution for these clear parts. Now moving on to the orange pieces here, I only have the one test to show because I think it came out very, very well for what I need to do with this. When this resin cured and I pulled it off the plate, it was very brittle, and I feared that I would break it off the plate. But with a little bit of instant persuasion with a tiny hammer of mine, I was able to pry the pieces off without shattering them completely. Since it was water soluble and I had the ultrasonic tank filled up, I could just dump these parts in, let her rip, and throw them in a water curing bath. I put the parts into the ultrasonic tank for about 5 minutes, and I think it kind of blasted the parts a bit more than I would have liked. So I think I'm gonna end up doing probably at max 2 minutes for small detailed parts in the ultrasonic cleaner, especially if it's water soluble. So with that, we see that all of the cones succeeded, and our failure cones succeeded in, I want to say, a bit of a bad way because of how much they protrude from the topmost layer. Now looking at the inside bottom layer and the inside top layer, it turned out very well, very flat on the inside bottom, and there's not a lot of waves at the inside top. So I would like to say that this cone test came out a success. And then moving on to the city, I am even more blown away. I want to say that my resin cleanliness was a lot better since I took a lot more time to clean it, switching from this clear to the orange resin. And so with that, our bottom layer exposure was phenomenal with this thinner resin here at 18 seconds. We have very sharp corners at the bottom interface of the city. We can see our text very clearly, and we can see all the details in the buildings. And there's not a lot of whitening from whatever the part came into contact with from the solutions that I used. So as we can see from the top, the braille is kind of missing. And going back to all of the cone tests, I had a suspicion that my build plate was not leveled correctly, and I believe that, well, I know now that it is not leveled correctly. So the next time I go and print a big part, I will clean off the plate and re-level it, and hopefully we won't have this issue anymore. So, you may be wondering, where's the clear part of this cool little desk item that I told you about? I'm wondering the same thing, but for the interest of time for this assignment and this video, and also me being very apprehensive at all of this, I mean, look at this flame here. It came out pretty clear. And then when I started post-processing it, I made the mistake of putting it in the ultrasonic cleaner that had contaminated water in it. And that's where we see all of those white particulates caking up the outside of the flame here. And it doesn't really look too pretty, considering that when I took the supports off, it was pretty darn glassy. So with that, I'm going to end up taking another step back and really brush over my procedures with making sure everything is clean in here. I don't know why I didn't expect that sunlu resin to have such a detrimental impact, but I guess the big lesson here is detail, detail, detail. Now to conclude, a lot of this video was to get better at editing, get better at the flow, and storytell in a way that really suits me. And if you made it this far and enjoyed it, I appreciate it. So thank you very much. And like always, it's been a pleasure.